I went inside the ruined wings of the abandoned hospital at Clark Air Base in Pampanga at midnight with one light and worse expectations. What met us that night wasn't just decay. It felt like attention. The gate gave a tired creak when we slipped through, and the air changed almost immediately. Outside it was the usual humid Philippine night, but inside the compound, the air felt strangely cold, like the building was holding a different temperature than the rest of the world. Just inside the entrance, an old reception desk was still buried under dusty patient charts. Names were fading into yellow paper, stamped dates barely readable anymore. It looked like people had simply stopped coming back to claim their records. We stepped into the main corridor, where the fluorescent lights flickered one after another down the hallway. Not randomly, one after another, like a weak heartbeat trying to keep the place alive. Somewhere deeper in the ward, we heard a slow drip echoing through the hallway. Then a second sound followed it, a faint metal scrape across the floor. My friend suddenly stopped walking. He said something brushed past him in the dark. Not like wind, or like someone moving quickly between hospital beds. But when we turned our flashlights toward the aisle, there was nothing there. On a rusted cabinet door nearby, someone had scratched a date and a child's name into the paint with something sharp. The letters were uneven, almost desperate. We decided to start recording audio. In places like that, silence can feel dishonest. Sometimes microphones catch things your ears miss. When we played back the recording, we heard something under the static. It was faint, but it sounded almost like someone repeating our names. Following the sound led us farther down the corridor until we reached an old therapy room. Glass cabinets still held rusted syringes and surgical tools behind cloudy glass. That's when the temperature dropped again. Our breath suddenly started showing in the air. At the far end of the room, we noticed a silhouette standing in the doorway. It wasn't moving, just standing there against the dim glow of a broken exit sign. We called out. The only answer we got was a whisper that sounded like a child apologizing, followed by a scratch dragging across the wall. Behind an old radiator, we found a small teddy bear wrapped in a hospital blanket. One of the glass eyes was missing. Then suddenly, every light in the room went out. Not flickering, just darkness. My phone lit up a second later, with a photo taken earlier in the night. It showed the same hallway we had just walked through. Except in the photo, the walls were covered in tiny handprints. Handprints that definitely weren't there when we passed through. We kept talking to each other just to prove we were still there, saying random things, colors, animals, anything to fill the silence. And then the building repeated one word back to us. Not clearly, but close enough. My friend suddenly dropped to his knees and pointed toward a doorway. A shadow moved along the wall, like someone turning a corner that didn't exist. We chased it through several rooms, but the building seemed to keep shifting the paths in front of us. Every time we thought we were close, it felt like whatever we were following moved farther away. At the stairwell, we found a line of wet footprints climbing upward. There were none coming back down. The prints stopped at the rooftop door. When we stepped onto the roof, the sky was just starting to turn gray with early morning light. The old runways stretched out beyond the trees, but on the railing near the edge, we noticed something that didn't belong there. A single small handprint in fresh condensation, not smudged. Perfectly clear. The wind started moving across the roof then, and for a moment it almost sounded like children humming a lullaby somewhere far away. We didn't stay any longer. We walked back down and left the building just as the sun began rising over the abandoned runways. Later that morning, back at home, we listened to the recordings again. Under our voices beneath the static, there was a whisper. Clear enough this time. 2 words. Stay with us. I tried to find answers later in old hospital reports and news archives, but most of what I found were fragments. Mentions of a ward that closed suddenly. Patient lists with names that simply stopped appearing. People around Clark say the hospital emptied faster than it should have. Rooms abandoned halfway through use, belongings left where they fell. I don't claim to know exactly what happened there. All I know is that sometimes, late at night, I wake up remembering the sound of those tiny voices echoing in empty halls. And if you ever find yourself walking through the abandoned hospital at Clark Air Base after dark, look closely at the railings. You might still find fresh handprints waiting there. Because some places don't forget the people who stayed behind.